Fantastic. All right. So folks, I think we should go ahead and get started. Again, we have our little less than 2 hours together now. Just a few logistical reminders, and then I'll invite your recommitment to our guidelines. We are a learning community. We do want to interact with each other, speak with each other in a way that is respectful, inclusive, and welcoming to everybody who's made the time to return for part 3. Also, if you wouldn't mind remaining muted until you have something you want to comment on, ask, share information, feel free to unmute at any time. You don't have to raise your hand. Just feel free to unmute. By all means, interrupt me mid-sentence if you'd like. What I would ask, though, is, please do not interrupt Billy if Billy has the floor and is making a point, or anybody else in the learning community. Let's offer each other that respect, that we will let people make their point. And then if you want to elaborate or comment, you're more than welcome to. The other one is just that please do speak from the I feel this way, I believe this. And also, a couple of people have already let me know, which is great. You remembered the guideline. Thank you, JC. If you are having difficulty activating your camera, or you're not able to activate your camera for some reason, for those of you who've already communicated with me, thank you. If you're not going to be on camera, please do. If you've done it already, you don't need to do it again, but please just send me a direct message and thank you, Sania. Send me a direct message letting me know that you're not going to be on camera. And as I said to one of our other colleagues, don't let that keep you from participating. If you're able to unmute, feel free to unmute. If not, feel free to use the chat. So given those are our guidelines, can everybody agree to those guidelines as stated? You can wave, nod, give a thumbs up. Excellent. Very good. Very good. Excellent. You can do it electronically. Fantastic. Or you can type the letter Y in the chat. All right. So reminder, those are our guidelines as we engage with each other for the remaining time that we have together. Now, I have a confession to make, and I am inspired by Jamie L. unmuting and asking me earlier, what exactly was it we were supposed to think about prior to? Now, I'm a little bit in the same boat as Jamie, because I know it's related to the scenario. I know I told you that I was going to ask my colleague. That's great, Lorraine. Thank you. I know I told you I was going to ask my colleague, Tree Chapel, to send you the scenario, and she did. And a number of you have confirmed that you got it. Does anybody recall, just to help Jamie and I out, does anybody recall what I invited you to think about, focus on, or consider that was related to the scenario? And you're more than welcome to unmute or put it in the chat if you remember.
Good morning. I believe it was if the counselor cared about the client. I believe that was a question.
Bingo. And Belinda J just confirmed that. And if you ever need somebody to play poker with, Belinda's the person. Because you can tell what she's got in her hand. Yes. Do you believe the worker cared about the client? So the floor is open for anyone who would like to either comment on that. Yeah, go ahead, Angel. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I say yes to a certain degree.
Okay.
Because each person has their own style of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So we also have to keep that in mind. We can't expect a person to act, even as professionals, a certain way.
Okay. Okay. So everybody has their own style. And you said, just so I'm clear, Angel, and we're going to go to Francine, you said that you think that she cared about the patient to some extent. Yes?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
She would not be in the field if she didn't.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. No, Belinda J, you are not on Jumbotron. You're just very communicative. Excellent. Francine, the floor is yours. Oh, Francine, you're still muted. Go ahead and unmute. I think I saw your.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, sorry.
No problem. Go right ahead.
Good morning. Yes, I agree. It almost seems like though she was probably maybe at like the end of her day and was just like rushing through it because I this is the first time I read this scenario and I was like, there's a lot of like empathy she could have given, a lot of like, I understand your frustrations. There was a lot of way that could have been reworded. And like Angel said, we don't get in this field unless we really care about people. Maybe she needs some self-care. This was one of my coaches, and I overheard this. I probably would say you need a self-care day because you're just not.
Okay. Yeah. And, Francine, the other thing that I really appreciate that you're adding is that, maybe it was the end of her day. She was kind of rushing through things. Who knows? But whatever it was, again, I just want to make sure you're in the same camp as Angel. To some degree, she cared.
Yeah. Like Angel said, she wouldn't be in this field if you don't.
Got it. And it's funny, Francine, you make me think of I had an opportunity to be with another learning community that actually one of our colleagues who's here today, who I will not name, was also in that learning community. And it wasn't Belinda J. She noticed her face did not communicate that it was her. Belinda's like, don't have everybody keep looking at me. So, Francine, you make me think that I said to this very group something so similar to what you just said and what Angel said, that these folks are not doing this work because they're there for the cash, the glamour, or the prizes. They're there because they care. And
That's true, because I definitely could be in another field and make way more money, but I care about these people. It's not a lot enough people care. We do this because we care. And we want to change lives.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Rebecca, the floor is yours, and then we're going to go back to Angel.
Thank you. Good morning. I definitely agree a lot with Francine that when I was listening to the conversation, it sounded like a person who maybe needed a self-care day or had been at the end of a lot of stuff going on, either personally or professionally. This one instance doesn't tell us very much necessarily about the conversations the patient and client had previously, and that can tell us a lot. So when you see just one instance, it can be hard to truly understand. And also knowing how they respond with other clients, because unfortunately, or fortunately, we all care, and that's why we're in this field. But unfortunately, sometimes we do present ourselves differently with different people. And I've definitely seen that in my work with other professionals, how they treat people differently, and that makes me sad. But it was an interesting conversation to bring forward for sure.
Okay. Rebecca, thank you so much. And before we go to Antonio, I'm just going to quickly acknowledge a couple of things that I'm seeing in the chat, which are Samantha says, I don't think it would have come across to the client that she cared. Interesting. And Samantha, I don't know if you want to unmute after Antonio and say anything about that. Marisol adds, I agree to a degree. We do have most people who care and love helping others, but also we have the ones who get in the field to work out their own unresolved issues and trauma. They can bleed their unresolved wounds with others, causing more harm than help. Okay. Yeah, and Abraham adds, okay. Understood, Abraham. That's fine. You join us by camera when you can. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Grand Rising, everyone. First and foremost, I believe it's like, I got to look at it from both sides of the coin.
Okay.
Sometimes in counseling or being a clinician can be demanding work. And there's many factors that can maybe pull someone as a counselor or clinician away from fully being present with the client.
Mhm.
It could be compassion fatigue or burnout.
Mhm.
It can be administrative demands. It could be focusing on finding a solution too quickly. And, a lot of us sometimes may assume, it could be personal stress,
Mhm.
or it could just be clinical agendas. So when you ask that question,
Mm.
there's many pieces to that puzzle. So I can't just give you one definite answer
Mhm.
because I don't know that person. And it's just a scenario that we're assuming once again.
Okay. Okay. So I'm prompted. I want to read what's in the chat, but I'm prompted to take Samantha's. Go ahead. Somebody wants to say something. Go ahead. Yep. Who is that?
Well, looking at this, and I'm looking at it from, I'm a
Okay.
student, so I don't have a lot of experience
Okay.
at this point. And I mean, it's possible, it looks like she's attempting to reframe. I see some reframing here,
Okay.
attempting to show some empathy, like she's understanding. She might not have the skills to really, do what we're learning here today. I'm surprised when I tell people in the field that I'm taking a motivational interviewing class. A lot of people don't even know about it. So in the training, we don't get a lot of training about how to actually apply this.
Mm.
So it's possible that she is thinking that she's doing connecting and being empathetic, and she's trying to use these skills, but not very effectively.
Heather, thank you. Thanks so much for adding that onto the table. And what? Oh, go ahead, Samantha. Go ahead, please.
Just gonna say, just point out, especially the one part when the client's talking about why I feel like she wouldn't feel like that. She's talking about her children, that she's worried about her children and her dog, and that her ex isn't really great to take care of them. And then the counselor rephrased that very negatively, which would make me feel like, that's how you think that I feel, like I'm not putting my kids and my dog first? Like, that's why I felt like that it wouldn't have came across the client, and the client isn't going to think about compassion fatigue or like any of those things. They're not, I don't think most of them are aware that, of our own, we have our own stuff,
Yeah. 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 And Samantha, you've made several really, really great and insightful points. And I want to underline, and I'm kind of repeating what you said, but I really want to repeat it because I think it's very insightful that the client is not responsible for our lack of self-regulation. I'm going to repeat that. The client is not responsible for our possible lack of self-regulation, meaning we might need a mental health day, we might, whatever. The client isn't responsible for making sure or cutting us slack if indeed that is the case. And we are human beings. This is not easy work. And then I want to come back to one other thing that you said, Samantha, but I'm going to turn the floor over to Antonio for a moment, and then we're going to come back to something else that Samantha said. Go ahead, Antonio, please.
And then also, as I further read this scenario is a good example of how a clinician or a counselor can unintentionally become less present or more invested in the outcome than really understanding the client, And from a motivational interviewing perspective, from my own experience, the counselor repeatedly moves away from the partnership and towards the persuasion. I think the counselor begins to argue for treatment, and that could be a red flag. I think the counselor also missed some deep emotion that the client was expressing, And I think the counselor also but doesn't know how to really write the reflex, if that makes sense.
Yes. It makes sense to me. I think it may require a little explanation for the learning community, but it does make sense to me. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Antonio. And if you don't want to, that's fine. I can underline what I believe you're alluding to there.
I wish you'd let me help you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 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 Yeah. And I believe what Antonio was referring to there, and then we're going to go to Angel and to Jenny B, is something called the writing reflex. It used to be called that. Now it's called the fixing reflex. And what Miller and Rolnick suggest is that we're all human beings. And for the most part, as was said earlier, we don't get into this field unless we have some sort of investment, that we care. And what can happen is if we care a lot and we're really concerned about what's going on, we may want to step in and try and fix, solve, or rescue. And that can really backfire. And Heather repeated the line, "I really wish you'd let me help you." That's kind of, in addition to some of the action she took, are references to the fixing reflex. And Jamie L is asking, does that cause, let me just read it directly. Does that cause burnout, the fixing? Yes. And I would say, yes, it does. It can actually make the work much more difficult for you because you are trying to fix, solve, or rescue. And ultimately, that's not really our job. So we're going to go to Angel, Jenny, and then I think back to Antonio. And then we're going to come back to what Samantha said earlier. Angel, the floor is yours.
Now, something that came to mind, she could be what I call from the old guard, where the 70s and 60s, they treated treatment like a military camp.
Yeah. Yep.
And those individuals are still in the field.
Yep.
And they still believe in that old mentality.
Yes.
They don't really want to follow the scientific aspect of it.
Yes.
I've encountered that a lot.
Okay.
In my walk.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
What I tell them is science has proven it works.
Yes. And I think we also can acknowledge anecdotally when we, and I'm going to use a word that Antonio used here because it's very MI consistent and very relevant. If we make the effort to engage in a partnership with somebody versus telling them what to do, it's much more likely that there are going to be better outcomes. So, point well taken, Angel. Jenny B, the floor is yours.
Is this also thinking about how it was received by the client, right? Because we don't know how many places and spaces that this client have gone to seeking some type of assistance, some type of help, and that help wasn't followed through. So there's a possibility, right, that this client sat down with this worker with a sense of loss of hope. Right. And, thinking about, I've been hearing this from other service providers time and time again. They didn't follow through. So what can you do for me? And and when I listen to that, right, I always think about, how these clients have been to places and spaces where they may have felt rejected.
Yes.
And they're just bringing on those feelings to the workers.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny B. Antonio, the floor is yours.
I think also sometimes, Paul, and I love how you advocated for me on that last piece, but I think sometimes also in this process, I cannot lose the fact that I have to stay curious. I have to stay curious, right? If I lose my curiosity, this may turn into a sword fight, because I'm trying to stuff something down your throat. I'm trying to make you see something that I see just because you walked in the door. Man, that take time, man. And also what I look at too is the fact that I might accidentally try to strengthen that sustained talk, and it might not be time yet. These are factors that I have to take into consideration. Because if I don't, I gotta ask myself, did I do well today with building rapport with that client?
Powerful, very powerful question. Did I do well today building rapport with that client? I.e., was I effective building rapport? I'm taking the temperature of the rapport. How is the rapport? And let me just quickly acknowledge a couple of things in the chat. And then Samantha, I want to go back. And if it's possible, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question. And you can let me know if that's okay or not. Heather says at the end, the therapist says, I really wish you would try. I really wish you would try to help. I think it's, I really wish you would let me help you. Make the client feel like the counselor thinks she is a problem. This is after the client shared a lot of information that the therapist could have stayed, and I love your word here, Heather, attuned to. And that's very in concert with what Antonio is saying as well. And Heather is also thanking you, Antonio, for the reminder about staying curious. And Samantha says, yes, you can ask me a follow-up question. Okay. Thank you, Samantha. So the follow-up question that I want to ask Samantha, and then we're going to use this as a transition into the next piece of what we're going to focus on. Samantha, you pointed out that there was a part of the speech, what the counselor said, that was what you felt was a negative reframe of what the client had said before. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing, if you're able to, I don't know if you have the scenario in front of you, but would you be willing to read, if you have it, what the worker said? I think I know what you're referring to, but I don't want to make an assumption.
All right, let me find it.
Okay, go right ahead. And I'm going to ask everybody to listen to this particular, it's called a volley, like when, if Samantha says something, that's her volley. If I respond or I say something after she stops talking, that's called my volley. So each utterance is called a volley. So.
Okay. You're struggling. So this is a counselor, right? You're struggling to put your kids first, your kids and dog's needs first. You're so tired of being controlled by the drug court, and going to jail feels like your only way of escaping the interfering control of the court system.
Okay. Okay. I understand what you're meaning there in terms of she's putting a negative spin on the court system. Is that kind of what you're referring to?
I was referring to the client was talking about how she's worried about her kids and
Yep.
and putting her dog and leaving her dog, and that the kid's father isn't someone that she can really trust.
Yep.
That she put the negative spin on that. The counselor took that and is like, oh, you're struggling to put your kids first, when that's not what it was to me that she was saying. She was saying that her kids and her dog are important to her.
Okay. Okay.
That's what I was talking about.
Okay. 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 So before we go to Alexis, do you want to comment on that part, or did you want to say something else?
No, I just wanted to comment on that part.
Yeah, please,
when
go
I
ahead.
read it,
Yeah.
when I read it, it was more of, I felt like the counselor was being kind of empathetic in that area,
Okay.
because saying that she was struggling, not in the sense of her not wanting to do it, but making sure that she has viable solutions or something that is a good solution for her kids and her dog in the situation. Like, she's struggling because she knows that maybe she won't put them in the best situation if she's gone.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, Alexis, you're hearing it in a particular way, and Samantha's hearing it a particular way, and this all really goes to how it's said.
Mm-hmm.
So before Alexis, you or Samantha mute again, Alexis, and Angel, I see you. I'll come to you in just a moment. Alexis, if you would be so kind, can you read what the client says before the
Okay.
workers? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, because, all right, I just wanted to add too, because what the client said after made me feel like it wasn't such a negative way that they took it, but I'll read what, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm worried about my kids. Plus, I don't want to leave my dog. I'm worried because my ex is a garbage father and he doesn't like my dog. I am so freaking sick of being controlled by the courts. I just can't take it anymore. I want my life back.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you want, Alexis, go ahead and read how she responds to what the worker says.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't see myself having good options. I need freedom from the courts and my probation officer. I don't care about my kids and my dog my dog through, don't get that twisted. I hate them seeing me as less than an adult. Using drugs and being in drug court makes me feel like a bad teenager. I don't want my kids to look down on me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I think what Samantha and Alexis are both really pointing up is it partly tone of voice really matters here, because it could be said in an empathic way. And Samantha, I think if you were going to reflect what the worker said, you might say something like, your kids and your dog are the most important things in your life. You might have started it that way, as opposed to you're struggling to put your kids and your dog's needs first. But again, it can be a tone of voice. And I really appreciate that both of you are kind of reacting to how you experienced it as well. Do you want to add anything else, Samantha, before we go to Angel?
I'll just say that when I read the second part, it sounded like she was trying to tell the counselor that they are important to me. So I mean, it is definitely how I probably life experiences too, right? Play into that factor of how we read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It absolutely would. And that could be read in a way that, or it could be spoken, let me put it that way. It could be spoken in a way that the message could be very different. And I do agree, I think, with kind of the insight that Alexis is bringing to it, that it is the workers, maybe not as skilled, but it's the workers' attempt to try and summarize back to her what she heard before. Yeah. So before I read what Antonio wrote, I'll just acknowledge Antonio put in before, and this is absolutely true, people are more persuaded by reasons they discover themselves than by the reasons others give them, i.e., and that's where the persuasion becomes a problem, because persuasion is me telling you why I think it's a good idea. And if you come up with the reasons why it's a good idea for you, I agree. And that's a very famous phrase, actually. Heather adds, there is a little positive talk or reframe from the therapist. The client is showing a desire to be responsible and is caring for her children and dog, and the therapist doesn't tell her that these are positive strengths, being responsible and caring. Heather, your point is really well taken. And my sense is, reading what you wrote, you would probably offer an affirmations, and you could offer affirmations of her being responsible and her care and her concern. Absolutely. Marisol adds, this is why conversations need to be face-to-face or via phone. Communication in writing can be interpreted based on one's experience, perspective, and mood in the moment at the time. That's true. And again, this is just a transcript of what was a face-to-face conversation. Antonio adds, when counselors become attached to a particular outcome, even one that may genuinely benefit the client, they can stop listening to the client's values, fears, and motivations. A point so well taken, that you cannot persuade and listen at the same time. And I think it's that simple. You can only do one of those things at a time. Presence means trusting that understanding the client comes before influencing the client. so beautifully written. And I want to read that again. And Antonio, if you want to elaborate or add anything, or feel free, I see that you shared a key at the end of that. Perhaps you may want to just drop the mic on that too. But if you want to elaborate, please feel free. But I want to read what Antonio wrote again because there's great insight in it. When counselors become attached to a particular outcome, even one that may genuinely benefit the client, they can stop listening for the client's values, fears, and motivations. Presence means trusting that understanding the client comes before influencing the client. That's very powerful. And that is why accurate empathy is so important, that desire to want to understand where the client is coming from. Okay? Excellent. So any other thoughts, comments, reactions about this scenario, or are you ready to leave it? We can set it aside. Yes, Heather says set it aside. Okay, excellent. All right. So I am actually going to share my screen because I want to remind you of two things, and I want to introduce something new. And I think Abraham may have alluded to this new thing that I'm going to introduce on day one, but I'm going to reacquaint you with two things we've already discussed. So just to keep in mind, folks, and we've already talked about two of these things. One, with the practice of motivational interviewing, these elements, these essential elements, are all part of the practice of motivational interviewing. They in themselves alone may not constitute the practice of motivational interviewing. And we know that in regard to MI Spirit, an MI spirited, MI consistent approach. And if anybody remembers the four-letter acronym that we associate with MI Spirit, please feel free to put it in the chat. Don't make any mistake. It's not a quiz. Yes. 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 With MI Spirit, it is pace. Darn comes a little bit later, and we'll talk about darn as we go forward. So pace. And if anybody wants to unmute and tell us what PACE stands for, again, not a quiz, just an opportunity to review. If anybody wants to unmute and tell us what PACE stands for, now is your moment. What does PACE stand for?
Partnership, affirm, compassion, empowerment. Okay,
excellent. I'm going to just make one revision, and I'm going to give you a 99.9 on that. It's acceptance is the A, but one of the, what you mentioned is one of the sub 4 A's. And I'm just very curious, does anybody remember what the sub 4A, we have one of them already, but does anybody remember the sub 4 A's under acceptance? And Francine, thanks for putting that there. Does anybody remember the 4 things that come under the umbrella of acceptance, the A in PACE? Does anybody remember? And one of them we have on the table already, which is acceptance. And we have 2, Jamie L, affirm. There are 2 more. I just said one of them a moment ago. Well, autonomy is part of it as well. Yeah. Absolutely. And I just said one of them. Absolute worth is one, absolutely. And then the one that I said just a moment ago. Does anybody remember the one? I'll give you the initials. The first word starts with an A. The second word starts with an E. A-E. Absolute empathy? No, it's actually, thank you.
Acceptance.
It's accurate empathy, but I like absolute empathy too, or absolute word. Yes, yes, I like absolute empathy as well, but it's accurate empathy. And again, just to be clear, folks, accurate empathy is making sure that we are doing our best, and I'm thinking of Antonio and others as I say this, to remain curious so we can increase our understanding of what's really going on for this person. Am I spirit? Am I consistent approach? Alone is not the practice of motivational interviewing, is absolutely necessary if we are practicing motivational interviewing. Antonio, the floor is yours.
And also, Paul, I've had time to sit and think about this. You know, empathy, I always say, is the ability to hold space. But I truly believe now that I've moved on to the next phase that empathy is me entering that person's world. So when I enter that person's world, I have no right to tell them where they're taking me. I just need to sit back and enjoy the ride. I need to understand what's this person been through, what they've encountered, what kind of traumatic experiences they've been exposed to, as opposed to telling them when to turn it off and when to, you know, I'm only on, I'm just on this. I'm just learning this, right? So that too, to me, I believe can bring up a red flag too when I try to dictate or control this person from expressing what they've been through before they walk through my office.
Thank you. And you know, you prompt me to want to add something to what you said, Antonio, and I'm taking the slide down for a minute to just add this, elaborating, or actually just adding a little bit to what Antonio said. We're seeing Angel kind of in and out. Your camera's working sometimes. Yeah, and Marisol writes, it is true, we are supposed to be collaborators in their process. And that's what the partnership is about. We're an equal collaborative partner, hopefully. To Antonio's point about empathy and about really being, and I'm going to frame it this way, Antonio, being in the moment with the person. And Antonio framed that as entering their world. Sometimes, folks, what people relate to us, and I know you know where I'm going with this, but sometimes what people relate to us doesn't always feel really good. It doesn't feel really good to them, and it may not feel really good to us. And if we are truly being empathic, we're going to do our best when we reflect it to them to reflect it back to them, honoring the reality of what they've actually experienced. Not trying to in any way sugarcoat it. That's what accurate empathy really means. It means you are seeking to accurately reflect back to that person what their experience is. Lorraine writes something in the chat. Let's take a look at it. Sometimes when working with individuals, it can be, what's wrong with this individual? Maybe it's really what happened to this individual. And Lorraine, I really appreciate you putting that in the chat, because that is one of the foundational pillars of trauma-informed care. We stop asking, well, what the heck is wrong with this person, i.e. the medical model, and we get curious and compassionate and start trying to find out what happened. And again, that may or may not be relevant when we're practicing motivational interviewing. And what I mean by relevant is I mean directly relevant. Of course, it's relevant if it's part of their human experience. It may not become part of the conversation. And if it doesn't become part of the conversation, we don't have to go looking for it, because it may not relate to the work we're doing when we're practicing motivational interviewing. Marisol adds, honoring their ability to open up their vulnerabilities to us, trusting us with their story. Yes, and beautifully put, Marisol, that is ultimately when somebody takes the risk to tell us about what's really going on, That's what they're doing. They are opening up. They are entrusting their story with you. And of course, we want to honor and respect that. I'm going to share my screen again. This is the new thing that I'm introducing, which is called the 4 tasks. It's the second bullet, the 4 tasks. The 4 tasks actually act as a blueprint of phases we go through as we are preparing to and then practicing motivational interviewing with somebody. And we'll review those in just a minute. OARS, you're all extremely familiar with. We identified open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. Again, the core communication skills. And again, repeating, being very clear, they are not exclusive in any way to the practice of motivational interviewing. So using any of these skills does not cause them in and of themselves to be the practice of motivational interviewing. It's when those skills are intentionally used for 2 purposes. Purpose 1, to explore, be curious about the ambivalence that the person has about the behavioral change goal that they're considering. 2, and this is where the DARN comes in that was mentioned earlier, DARN. When we are using any of these 4 tools to invite the person to talk about their desire to make this change, their ability to make this change, their reasons to make this change, or their need or needs to make this change. That is what causes the use of these skills in combination with MI Spirit, moving through these 4 tasks. That's what causes it to be the practice of motivational interviewing. Remember, it's verifiable. You can code a conversation. And guess what? Time permitting, you are going to get to code a conversation that you're going to hear somebody practicing or using these tools. Mason adds, it gives a lot of flexibility to use this tool. Mason, you could not be more correct. There is a tremendous amount of flexibility, and there needs to be. And I'll go back to what our colleagues were saying about interpreting what someone's saying. We don't all hear what somebody says the same way. So we might choose a different tool in that particular moment. And that could be just as effective as a tool that somebody else might choose. So again, just by way of quick review and to let you know, you have these available in the slide set for you. MI Spirit, an MI consistent approach. It's the way we are. It's a way of being. And as Belinda demonstrated beautifully when we met together last, MI Spirit can be communicated through tone of voice. It can be communicated through nonverbal, which was also mentioned, nonverbal communication. And we know that these 4 components make up how we want to interact with this person. And we also know under acceptance, there are 4 additional aspects to it. Absolute worth, underlining and affirming somebody's strengths and efforts, honoring the person's autonomy, and then accurate empathy, sometimes referred to as absolute empathy. I'm going to add that to my slide. I don't know if Bill Miller would like that though. And then there is compassion and empathy, and empowerment means allowing the person to exercise their autonomy. And that scenario that we looked at, I believe, and this is my 2 cents, this is Paul making a statement, I believe that scenario represents what I would call a missed opportunity. Because yes, the client does exercise their autonomy. I'm not sure how empowered they are in that moment by exercising their autonomy. So when I read and hear that scenario, as beautifully read as it was in our learning community, it kind of breaks my heart because it feels like a missed opportunity. So that's all I'll say in regard to that. Something just came in the chat. Let me quickly take a look. Rebecca, you agree. Rebecca, I don't know if you'd be willing to unmute again, but if you would, could you say a little bit about why you believe it's a missed opportunity? I personally didn't elaborate, but I'm very curious to know what your take would be as to why you would see it as a missed opportunity.
I think I just agree with a lot of what some of the people have been saying this morning, where the service provider didn't really talk with the client or get their perspective or have them develop the plan. Yeah. It sounded like they developed it before and without, and making some assumptions maybe about what was best. And unfortunately, that frequently doesn't build relationship or trust and honesty. So I think more open-ended questions and conversation with the client maybe would have led them to the same decision or not, but it would have been their decision. And that's what's important.
Thank you.
I'm always telling a social worker that just started working with me that we have to give them all the resources that we know of, and then they make the decision about how to move forward, even if the resources might not be what they want or what they like, or it's what's available. Because I could go on. Sorry. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Antonio, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Also, through my own experiences, what I've learned in this process is that I have to capture those moments, right? When I'm building rapport with clients. And every tool doesn't work at that time. I can't use the same tool for different clients. Right. Some tools appear at that time, and some tools I put them away for later.
Right.
You know, going into the change talk and the sustain talk, sometimes I can come with that concept, and sometimes that concept needs to be slowly put out there, right? Because people are still processing, man. And I have no right to tell them when is it time for them to get it. They get it when they get it. I'm not here for that. My job is to encourage, give suggestions, and advocate to you from the best ability that I can, and also create a safe space for you. All those other things will come later, but the number one tool that I'm trying to give you is empowerment.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much, Antonio. So the new thing that I introduced, because we said that MI spirit, MI consistent approach, something we've been talking about, looking at, hearing wonderful examples of during the course of our time together. OARS, the core communication skills. Again, I'll go back to what Mason said about their flexibility, and also the flexibility of the practice of MI as well. Courtney adds in the chat, a carpenter doesn't show up to build a house with just a hammer. It takes a multitude of tools to get the job done. Yeah, Courtney, thank you so much for saying that. And I'll tell you something. A wonderful colleague that I have had in prior learning communities once said, when you're practicing motivational interviewing, you have to think like a plumber, because you show up for the job, you figure out what tool you need to do that part of the job. And a carpenter works equally as well. You have to have more than a hammer. Absolutely. So the 4 tasks, this is a guide. They're not always linear, but this is a helpful guide to understand from the base foundation, that relational foundation of an MI-spirited, MI-consistent approach, the transition into the practice of motivational interviewing through the planning process. So you'll see on this staircase, I'm going to ask everybody, as you look at this staircase, and again, or as this staircase is being described to you, if you're looking at it through a description or hearing about it through a description, which of the tasks is the first step, I like putting it that way, is the first step in the practice of motivational interviewing and also forms the foundation. If you can discern that from this little pictogram, just go ahead and type that task in the chat. Angel, go ahead. The floor is yours.
I would say engagement.
Why would you say that?
That first initial contact is so important.
Yes.
That's the groundwork of where the relationship is heading.
Thank you. Yeah, makes perfect sense, Angel. Makes perfect sense. And that is all. You aren't practicing MI at that point. What you're doing is you're hopefully bringing an MI consistent, MI spirited, and thank you all for those of you who wrote engagement, engaging in the chat. And Belinda, thank you for true, because I believe you're reacting to what Angel said.
I just agree because to me, that's the first step in trying to get a partnership or facilitate a partnership with the client.
Yep.
You got to have that first before anything.
Yep. Yep. And Belinda, I'm gonna add something to you. Inspire me to add something to what I said, and tell me if you agree or you're okay with my adding this. And that is, it is definitely the first step which we've identified, and it's the always step. It's not like, okay, I did it. Now I can crumple that one up and throw it into the garbage and I can move forward. Would you agree, Belinda, that we could also say it's an always step? Okay, thank you. Okay, excellent. So it is the foundation. Belinda and I have just come up with always step. If you use that phrase, she gets 15 cents, I get 10 cents. So it's the always task that we're doing. It is the MI spirited, MI consistent approach. Then, during the course of that conversation, during the course of engaging, and to Angel's point, building that rapport, to Belinda's point, building that partnership, what can occur there is what's called focusing. And focusing is where an identifiable behavioral change goal or target enters the conversation. Sometimes it's the client who brings that to the table. Sometimes through the conversation, it might be something we bring to the table and they resonate with, and it becomes their goal during the conversation. This is when we transition, or transition is not really the right word. It's when we add in, we start to intentionally add in the practice of motivational interviewing. And this is what makes MI different than person-centered, client-centered work or counseling. It's the intentional evoking, and let me acknowledge our learning community colleague who wrote darn in the chat earlier. It is when we are intentionally inviting the person using OARS to elaborate on their desire, ability, reasons, or need to focus or accomplish this change goal. During the evoking, what can happen, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute because I want to see your faces as I say this, but what can happen, folks, is when we're practicing motivational interviewing and we're evoking around their desire, ability, reasons, or need, you will, the more you practice this, you will begin to hear the client's language change. And it will start to indicate to you that they are ready for planning. And let me just underline for you, because we could probably spend another 2 hours just focusing on that. Identifying the language that the client may offer. But this is just something to consider. One language change you'll notice. Remember, we said that there are 2 sides to the language of ambivalence. We said there's, and Abraham put this on the table day 1. There's change talk, anything the person says in favor of making that change. And then there's something called sustain talk, which is anything the person says maintaining the status quo, meaning not making the change. Both of those sides of the language are both normal and both relevant in the conversation. Sometimes when we start the conversation about the behavioral change goal, when that conversation begins, there's oftentimes more sustain talk than there is change talk. So the quantity of sustain talk is more. The quantity of change talk is minimal. If we put that change talk that they offer to work, if we intentionally evoke around their desire, ability, reasons, or need to make that change, that balance begins to shift. There starts to be more change talk than sustain talk. That's one indicator we know that a person is now, they have enough motivation, they've explored and resolved their ambivalence enough to create a tipping point where they may say, Alexis, I am going to cut down the amount of coffee I drink. Alexis, these are some of the ideas that I have about how I can cut down the amount of coffee that I drink. Alexis, could you offer me some suggestions of how I could cut down the amount of coffee I drink? Alexis, since I saw you last, I did this, and that helped me cut down the amount of coffee I drank. That's called commitment language. C, activation, which is creating a plan. And then TS, which is taking steps. Those are the changes in the client language that you will begin to notice. And then the person is ready to plan. And I think Antonio or somebody, and Angel, I see you, I'm not forgetting you. I'll make this point and then I'll hand it over to you. And I think Antonio or somebody else made this point. If we plan too early, guess whose plan it is? It's our plan. And to Antonio's point in the chat, a person is much more likely to carry out their plan than our plan. It's just a fact. So just keeping that in mind. Angel, the floor is yours.
I was going to say something along those lines, that the change could be immediate. Even though you don't see it, there's a moment that the client gets it and they come to you.
Yes. Yes. That absolutely can happen. And that's
happened to me.
Okay. Yeah. 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 And it's also, that's when they're starting to experience the impact of their motivations. Because keeping it really simple, folks, what the data really shows about motivational interviewing, and Angel, you alluded to it earlier, how much data there is about the practice of motivational interviewing. But what that data really shows, folks, and I want this to be very clear and very simple. okay? And I'm thinking of Abraham as I say this, and I'm so grateful that Abraham put on the first day change talk, because it's totally related to the research findings. And keeping it really simple, the research around motivational interviewing confirms and continues to confirm that the more change talk the client speaks, the more likely they are to say, Alexis, I'm going to make this change. The more likely they are to move toward commitment, activation, making their own plan, and taking steps. That's the impact, the powerful impact of their change talk, not ours, theirs. And that's basically the bottom line of what the research says, folks. The more change talk they offer, the more likely they are to move toward commitment language and then move toward action and planning. Yes, Marisol, they do need to keep their sense of agency. And, you know, you may find out that the person doesn't feel like they have any agency. And, you know, how we interact with them can help build their sense of agency. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again and just say one more thing about the 4 tasks. P.S. In the 3rd edition, they were called the 4 processes, but they changed it in the 4th edition to the 4 tasks. Thank you for making that change. It's clearer if you just call them tasks. Now, again, they're not linear and they are a guide. I'll just repeat. If you jump to planning before you've evoked the person's desire, ability, reasons, or need, the person's probably not going to follow through on that plan. All right. Now, somebody said to me once, well, let me ask you this. Before I show you what's going to fill this box on the side, does anybody know why I chose this photograph for this particular topic? Does anybody have an idea of why I chose this photograph? Yes, Johanna. Yes, I chose it because these guys, probably from 1920, are holding oars. Somebody, can you see it? Somebody said to me once, I have a question about that picture. Why are you showing us guys in old-fashioned bathing suits? I said, because they're holding oars. We know what oars are. We know they're the communication skills. Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, and they help guide our conversation, and we choose these intentionally for what's happening in the moment, and there's no one right tool to choose at any given moment. Yes, Rebecca adds, it is the rowing team that won beyond odds in the 1920s. Okay, so I was correct. It is. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks so much. I was pretty sure it was the 20s, but thank you for adding that other information. Yeah, and pulling together and yes, pulling together with their tools. Absolutely, Lori. The fact that the tools are all working in concert with each other in order to move forward, which is what we're hoping for. So we really don't need to spend a whole lot of time on these particular things. Now, I'm going to take this moment, and those of you whom I've had the opportunity to be in the learning community with before will be very familiar with this particular story. but I'm going to share it again because there's a particular point I want to underline. Similar to the gentleman that we talked about the first day, this particular woman that I was speaking with had a very particularly and specifically identified behavioral change goal. And what I'm going to ask is, when I reveal the change goal to you, if it makes you think of a particular phrase, feel free to write it in the chat. Her behavioral change goal was that she was currently smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And from her calculation and from what I've been told, that's 40 cigarettes. So she was smoking 40 cigarettes a day. Her goal was to go from 40 cigarettes a day to 15. So she wanted to cut down the amount of cigarettes that she was smoking. She wanted to go from 40 to 15. Now, my question to you, do you have any reaction to that behavioral change goal? And does it remind you of a particular phrase? And I'll give you a hint. HR, and I don't mean human resources.
Harm reduction.
Thank you, Heather. Heather, is it okay if I ask you a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and a couple of other people are writing harm reduction in the chat too. Heather, this is what the client identified as the behavioral change goal. Do you have any thoughts or reaction to that behavioral change goal?
I think that's a very great and doable goal.
Thank you. And Heather, could you just confirm that we did not speak before, nor did I pay you to say that?
We did not speak before, nor did you pay me to say that.
Excellent.
And I think offering, like, if you decide you want to decrease even more or quit altogether, I'm here as a resource. But until then, this is a fantastic milestone to set.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Does anybody else have any other reaction to this particular? And Heather, thanks so much for giving us harm reduction and for starting us off with that. Does anybody else have any other? Yeah, go ahead, Angel. Let's hear Angel's reaction to the goal. Heather's very intently listening to what you're saying, Angel. Go ahead.
I do harm reduction on a regular.
Okay.
And one thing I would suggest to the client is go slowly.
Okay.
Because withdrawal is real.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So that may be information that you may want to share with the person so that they have a heads up about what they could be experiencing. Fantastic. Yeah, go ahead, Samantha.
I had a lot of the same thoughts as
Heather.
I forgot his name.
Oh, Angel.
Angel, yeah. Like going from 40 to 15 cigarettes to anybody who's ever smoked before is not easy, and just reminding them that, you know, don't beat yourself up if you struggle with that goal, but definitely it's doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Very similar to what Heather was saying. Fantastic goal, doable. Yep, and Lori mentions it's a start. Absolutely. Let's see if we can get maybe one more reaction, if anybody else has a reaction to the harm reduction goal as stated. 40 cigarettes a day to 15. Anybody else have any reaction to that? Okay. Now, okay. Hold on. Marisol wrote in the chat. Let me read what Marisol wrote. Marisol writes, awesome. I would even add the savings in money for something they want. Yeah, that could be one of the secondary, benefits or outcomes of this goal, because they're spending less money on cigarettes. All right. So I'm going to tell you, before I tell you the rest of the story, I'm going to just tell you, buying a car. Lori, that is a dangerous thing for you to put in the chat, because I love cars and I love to look at them. And if I could, I'd buy a car every day, but I can't and I shouldn't. And now I'm driving an electric car, which I love. It's really fun. But let me say this. There are folks in prior learning communities, and there could be some in this one, who may feel this way. They're kind of like, well, dang, if she's going to cut down that much, why doesn't she just quit? I don't know if anybody had that thought, but some people, Jamie, consider not playing poker. And it's very funny because your tile is right next to Belinda J's tile. The table is forming. So some people have said that. And again, you would need to know what attitude you were going in to that conversation with. Jamie, do you want to add anything? Jamie L, do you want to comment? Do you want to add anything? You can pass. You don't have to. You had a big smile on your face, just checking.
So anybody that smokes knows that, or has smoked, knows that. Somebody that's going from 40 to 15, and then somebody says, oh, well, why don't you quit? And they're like, are you crazy? You know?
Right.
Okay, so here's this thing. Okay, your doctor says you need to quit smoking, but you don't need to start vaping. Because a lot of things get traded from one thing to the other.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Going for 40 cigarettes, which is a lot of cigarettes in one day.
Yeah.
Which means they're smoking almost nonstop.
Yeah.
To 15.
Yeah.
Is a lot. That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's an ambitious goal. And you know, Jamie, that switching dynamic that you mentioned, I believe that has a clinical name, which is called switching seats on the Titanic. Because sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's out of the frying pan and into the fire. It can be. But to acknowledge, to be very real, sometimes that's part of somebody's process. And again, we want to try to be with them where they're at. All right. A couple of other things came in the chat. I just want to quickly check that.
Gentleman,
Go ahead. Yeah. Did somebody want to add something? I thought I heard a voice. Okay. Nope. All right. I'm going to check the chat again. Yes. Courtney writes, that's a cross addiction. Yep. And Marisol writes, any type of behavior change, it takes time and small steps. The patient will set the parameters. Yes. Maria also adds, big tobacco, genetically engineered cigarettes, so that would be virtually impossible to just quit. And Maria, thank you for putting that in the chat. And I am going to add something in the chat that may explain or add some further depth to what you wrote in the chat. And I'm just going to type 3 of them in the chat. But that's sort of my belief behind it. Yes. And sadly, we know that nicotine actually can ruin someone's life and their life experience, and it can cause premature death. We know that. That's a scientific fact. And again, to everybody's point, any kind of change, especially one that's been genetically engineered to keep you hooked and make your unhooking uncomfortable, takes courage, takes commitment, and requires support. So this was the woman's goal. And I'm very familiar with this because this is a conversation that I was having, and it was a conversation that was actually recorded. And I had written and signed, I had written informed consent, but it was being recorded because I had to submit my MI practice to be considered to join the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. You have to submit a sample of your work, and they code it and decide whether they want to invite you to pay a lot of money and join their training. So yeah, I'm just giving you the facts. So during this conversation, the woman did reveal to me why she wanted to make this change. And let me acknowledge, I had the opportunity to practice motivational interviewing because she had a behavioral change goal. It was very specific. She was ambivalent about it. Part of her definitely wanted to make this change. Another part of her wanted to keep smoking the 40. Okay? So we know that that was an opportunity. Courtney adds, that makes sense. My dad used hard candies. Let me read that out loud completely. Used hard candies to help him stop smoking. Thank you. Thanks for adding that. Lori added, another topic, big tobacco now has the market on the candy industry. Oh, that's frightening. I didn't know that. I do now, though. So let me underline, folks, that she did reveal to me during the course of the conversation what her motivation was. And I'm just curious, and I'm actually inviting you to guess, and please use the chat. And I'm asking you to guess. I'm going to tell you what she told me, but I'm asking you to guess. Why do you think she was considering this change? 40 to 15. What do you think was causing her to think about this particular, to consider this particular change? Health issues, yeah. Angel, go ahead.
Somebody already said it. Health concerns.
Okay, fantastic. Health concerns, grandchildren, her cough, perhaps related to her time management cost. Okay, yeah. Just let me see. Yep. Her health several times. And Lori, I really appreciate you being so specific. Her cough. Yep. And Marisol also in terms of time management. Any other thoughts? Anybody want to put anything else in the chat about why you think she was considering this change? If you want to unmute, you can too, but I'll just throw it out if you want to put it in the chat. Cancer diagnosis. Thanks, Johanna. Or I think I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Please let me know. What was that? Family pressure, her loved ones' concerns. Well, I want to assure you, she told me. Courtney also adds, it can also, and Lori's adding cost as well. Courtney adds, it can also take a toll on a person's relationships. Non-smoking family may not visit as often. Yeah, I really appreciate your expanding this out. Now, remember, and I'm thinking of Antonio as I say this, remember, we want to be curious. We want to find out from her. And she did tell me. So now I'm going to tell you what she told me. She said that she and her 6-year-old daughter were in their living room together. She was sitting on a love seat and her daughter was sitting in one of the, reclining chairs, and they were watching TV together. And they were watching some comedy program and they were both enjoying it and laughing and having a really good time. And the program paused for like a commercial break. And guess what the commercial was? Yeah, it was one of those really graphic, scary, trying to scare you out of smoking commercials. They didn't say a word to each other. And it was the kind of commercial where the person is like pulling an oxygen tank, their fingers are amputated, they have a tracheotomy. It was very intense and very graphic. But they didn't say anything to each other. The show came back on. They were watching it together. And then she said she didn't realize this, but her daughter had gotten up from the side chair and had moved over to the love seat. She didn't even hear her. She was so quiet. And she said her daughter took her hand and put it on her mother's hand and looked her mother in the eye and said, "Mommy, I don't want you to die." That's why she was considering making this change. Yeah. Yeah. At that particular moment, I was practicing motivational interviewing. And P.S., the tape recorder was going and this conversation was being recorded. So she said that, and it seems like, based on what a couple of people put in the chat, that you can get a sense of the intensity of the moment. So my question to you, I'm practicing motivational interviewing. Yeah, yes, Sonia, I believe it was a pivotal moment. And I appreciate you acknowledging that in the chat. I'm practicing motivational interviewing. There are many ways and many tools I could use to respond, right? So my question to you, and maybe we can hear from 3 people who'd be willing to unmute, because I'm aware of the time, but maybe we could hear from 3 people who'd be willing to unmute. What do you think I did next after she said that? What do you think? Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
Okay, so Kate, I'm new to this, but with something like that, I would not dive into any kind of goal setting. I would just share in the emotional moment that she experienced at that time with her daughter, because that must have been a very heavy or impactful experience for her to share that with her daughter. So I would take time to, kind of talk with her about that.
Okay.
Or going to the next step.
Okay. Okay. Heather, can I ask you a quick follow-up question before we hear from other folks?
Okay, I'll try to do my best to answer.
Well, you've already set the stage for, for very rich conversation. So my question to you is, if you were going to put what you described, because you described what you do beautifully, if you were going to put what you described into quote unquote action, what would you do or say?
It's hard for me without being in the moment, because I think a lot, as we've been talking about, of what we communicate is in our meta communication.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just, how your body language is to them, how you're showing attunement in your eyes and relating to them. I think with that kind of emotion would be very, very important. Kind of letting your natural empathy come out and moving really slowly. I've heard a lot about how important it is to pause and let the other person have room to share what their experience is. So depending on the words she said to me, I may respond with some open-ended questions, but I would also allow a lot of space and silence for her to be able to share what she was feeling in that moment.
Thanks so much, Heather. Thanks for starting us off. Thank you. And by the way, stay tuned. I'll tell you what I did. So you would ask an open-ended question, and your open-ended question would be, what are the positive and the negative feelings you're feeling at that point?
From that experience.
Thank you. Thanks for the correction. From that experience. Okay. And I'm gonna throw something out before we go to Alexis. Alexis, don't lose your thought. I'm coming right to you. I'm gonna guess that a number of people in our learning community, and this is a guess, I could be wrong, but I'm gonna guess that a number of people in the learning community, just from the way I told you the story, have a sense of what she was feeling at that particular moment. I could be wrong. You may not. But I'm asking you to ask yourself, do you have any hunch or instinct about what she might have been feeling at that particular moment? Alexis, the floor is yours. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. No, I was just gonna say, it was basically what Heather said earlier about just like affirming, like, oh, that is, that's great, that you made that decision, and just affirming that decision that she made. And then also, probably going to like, maybe like the planning, asking her if she has a plan and how she's going to obtain this goal and things of that nature.
Okay, so let me just be clear. You would have affirmed her for the decision she made to cut down, and you would have followed that with open-ended questions about if she had a plan, what that might be.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else want to throw out on the table? Yeah, Jamie wrote affirm. Maria asked, how did that make you feel? Yeah. Okay. So before I tell you what I did, I just want to ask, does anybody have a hunch about how the client was feeling when she told me that story? Okay, Samantha says, yes, she has a hunch. She's not going to tell me what the hunch is because I asked a closed question. Samantha, could you say a little bit about the hunch that you have about how the client is feeling?
I'm sure she was feeling upset and probably very guilty, like Marisol said, and like, just like, how could I do this? Make my kid feel that way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Anybody else want to share their hunch about what the client was feeling? And I see a few in the chat. Kimberly writes, confronted, Marisol guilty, causing emotional harm to her baby. Okay. I think I hear somebody else.
I look at it differently.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Because this is her daughter.
Yeah.
So it's coming from a place of love, a place of harm.
Yep. Okay. And Angel, if it's okay, can I just repeat the question?
Yes.
What do you think the client was feeling as she was telling me and at the conclusion of telling me that story?
I think she's feeling loved.
Okay. Okay. Love from her daughter.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So we also have in the chat, guilty that her daughter was feeling this way. Belinda P says that. Jamie, as a parent, it made my heart hurt thinking about my child worrying about my dying. Okay. And Courtney adds, absolutely. That has to be the ultimate gut punch. Okay. That should be, yes, Lori, I couldn't agree with you more. Lori's like, that should be the real commercial. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So folks, I'm now going to tell you what I did. I did two things. Thing one, I was present. Thing two, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't say a word. I was present, silent. I let her change talk do its work. And then after I felt that space, and what she said had done its work, very similar to what Heather said. I was getting meta communication from her about she was sitting in that moment with what she just said. And when I got the sense that she had accepted that moment, I said the following. And I'm going to ask you to write, what is this tool that I'm using? It's either it's either O, A, R, or S. Okay? So I said, but again, to Heather's point and to others' point, Alexis, you also alluded to this too. The space, giving what she said, the space to do its work. Then I said the following, and I'm also going to try and say it the way I said it to her, because as Belinda has shown us quite skillfully, how you say something is a communication as well. So I said to her, your daughter doesn't want you to die. That's all I said. So what was that? Is that an open-ended question? Is that an affirmation? Is that a reflection? Or is it a summary? Yep. Yep. So most people are saying it's a reflection. Kimberly, it wouldn't be an affirmation in a technical sense, because I wasn't identifying her strengths or her efforts. If I would have said to her, you're committed to being the best parent you possibly can, that would have been an affirmation. Yep, Lori's mentioning it's a reflection as well. So most people think it's a reflection. Now, I'm going to invite, and maybe we can hear from two folks in regard to this, because remember, there's no one right way to do this. My question to you folks is, why do you think, well, and definitely it's reinforcement, but why do you think I chose to do a reflection in that moment? And P.S., I didn't choose from here, I chose from here. Maricel writes, shows you listen to what she was saying, truly. Rebecca adds, to allow her time to share more, to let her know you heard her. Yes. And I will also underline, I said it that way also because it was the most powerful thing for her. And again, I wanted her to know that I heard the most powerful thing. Okay? So that's what we mean by accurate empathy. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lori. I don't want her to die either because I care. But that's not the place I'm going to tell her that. Because what I want doesn't really matter. Yeah. All right. All right. So folks, I'm going to share my screen again and being very clear that we are getting close to, and Marisol, you're 100% correct in that. That is what was causing her to want to cut back. Now, be careful as you consider what we're talking about, because some folks, no one has yet said this, but you may have thought it, but no one has said it. Some folks may say, well, that's an extrinsic motivator. It's something outside of her that's motivating her. She's not doing it for herself. And what I will invite you to consider is that when we're practicing motivational interviewing, whether it's extrinsic or intrinsic, we're going to go with what's most authentically important to the patient or the client. Belinda J., you're nodding your head vigorously. Would you be willing to comment on why that makes such a gesture from you?
It makes sense because sometimes it's not always an internal motivation that will cause people to change. It could be something external. If you take something like, for example, somebody that was drinking heavily and they got a DUI, you know, sometimes they may not come into treatment saying, or meet with a counselor saying, well, I realize that I need to stop drinking. It's like, okay, I got this DUI and I want the judge off my back. Sometimes that may be what it takes to get them to make that initial change. And hopefully later on, maybe there's some internal motivation to make long-term change. So yeah, so sometimes it's not always the internal that might cause people to take their first step towards change.
Thank you. Thank you. And before we go to Angel, I just want to underline, and I think that you said this, and I'm just going to reduce it to something just a little bit smaller, which is that we're not in the business of judging somebody's authentic motivation. If that's their motivation, if that's where their feelings are most connected to, if that's what is most powerful for them, we want to meet them where they're at. And we ignore that at our peril, I think. Or peril is too strong a word. We ignore that at our being less effective. Marisol says, people will change either for extreme joy or extreme pain, and probably everything in between, depending on the person. Depends on the person. And that's why accurate empathy is so important. Just to remind you of a couple of things before, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have some extra time that I can let you use to complete the evaluation. But keep in mind, when we are practicing motivational interviewing, when we've built that relational foundation through engaging, and we have, in the course of the conversation, a person-centered, client-centered behavioral change goal has become present that the person is ambivalent about, we are now able to practice motivational interviewing. We are intentionally guiding that conversation. It is directional toward the change goal. We use the tools, the OARS, intentionally connected to helping the person to explore their ambivalence and to help them identify and strengthen their motivations. We are not directive. Being directive, telling the person what to do, is am I inconsistent? The North Star that the practice of motivational interviewing has, and the reason I call it the North Star is because it guides the conversation, is the behavioral change goal that the person feels ambivalent about. And let me remind you, because we did talk about this the first day, if a person is considering change, they are not ambivalent about it, and they are ready to plan, do not practice motivational interviewing. You can interact with them in an am I spirited, am I consistent way. You can do that for any and every conversation. We practice motivational interviewing when there's ambivalence about this behavioral change goal. We're not going to touch this dentist video because we've done it a different way in our learning community. But what I will invite you to consider is remember that change talk is 1/2 of the language of ambivalence. It is the language that the client offers about the change that they're considering. Okay? Just like the young gentleman we met on the first day who said, well, my boss has told me that if I come back late from lunch one more time, he's going to fire me. That's change talk. He also told us, my My girlfriend has told me that when I'm under the influence of weed, I don't treat her with the same kind of respect I do when I haven't smoked. That is also change talk. Okay? So change talk is anything the person says that they say, not that we say. Now, we may put their change talk to work, but it's still their change talk. We didn't say it. They originally said it. And I will tell you, as I mentioned earlier, the change talk is the key to success. It is gold. And when a person offers change talk, when it naturally occurs, or if we intentionally use an open-ended question or a reflection or a summary to evoke it, we want to put it to work. One other thing that I will ask you to consider, just as we start to bring this conversation to a close. Many of us, and I will make an I statement here, I was trained to come up with insightful and intelligent questions. There sometimes is an association, motivational interviewing. Well, when you interview somebody, you ask them questions. There sometimes is an over-reliance on questions. And the ratio that is offered as a guideline is if you ask an open-ended question and you get an answer, you want to offer at least 2 reflections before you ask another open-ended question. Okay? You want to try and do more reflections than actually questions. But again, like our colleague in our learning community who mentions carpenters and their hammers, my other colleague in a prior learning community who mentions plumbers, we want to use the right tool for the job. We want to be intentional about the tool we're using. And we do not have to only rely on questions. We can also ask permission. And keep in mind, asking somebody permission. You've seen me do it in our learning community. I might say, Samantha, could I ask you a follow-up question? That's a closed question. It's a good example of the closed questions have their place. We can respect somebody's autonomy by asking permission, and it can help continue the conversation. And if the person says no, that's okay. Respect it. So if you're in a conversation with somebody and all of a sudden they start saying to you, Crystal, I only do this as a way to socialize. I don't see it as a problem. That would be sustained talk. If they start to offer you a lot of sustained talk and you feel like the engagement or the rapport that you had has somehow been disrupted and you're a little bit distant from each other, that's called discord. If the person starts to transition into doing these things, ask yourself, am I doing anything or saying something to this person that could be evoking sustained talk or causing friction or discord in our relationship? If you answer that in a non-judgmental way and you find that there is something you're doing, you can course correct. You can go back to engaging. So just keep that in mind. More sustained talk, more discord in the relationship, disconnection, is a sign that we may be pushing our agenda, is a sign that we may be giving information that we didn't ask permission to give, is a sign that we may be telling the person what to do. And the person, the client, is being put in the position of pushing back. And Lori added, like a compassionate detective. Yes, we definitely want to be compassionate curious detectives. And what we are attempting to detect is the specificity of their ambivalence and the specificity and individuality of their desire to make the change, abilities to make the change, reasons to make the change, or need. If they offer any of those, they're all change talk. Final thought, and we've already talked about the fixing reflex. Let me acknowledge for you that it's normal. Probably anybody who's a helper, for whatever reason, has the fixing reflex to some degree. Now, that was just a generalization, and I want to acknowledge that, because there may be people in this learning community who really don't have the fixing reflex at all. What I can tell you is I do, personally. I continue to have it, and I have learned to manage it as opposed to act it out. And just keeping that in mind, again, we can acknowledge that we have it, but we don't have to act it out. And this little acronym, yet another one, can help us to remember not to act out on the fixing reflex. And the acronym is RULE. We can resist the fixing reflex. We can seek to understand the person's motivation. We can put our energy into listening and trying to understand instead of fixing. And we can empower this person by honoring their self-determination. Go ahead, Angel, the floor is yours.
Fixing causes burnout.
For the worker, yes, you're 100%. And somebody actually alluded to that in the chat. I couldn't agree with you more. Fixing definitely can cause burnout. It takes a lot of energy. And frankly, it's not very successful, and it can be very disappointing. Jamie L is asking if you're getting these slides. The answer is yes. You will be getting a copy of these slides. So before I officially give you that last QR code slide, and before my colleague puts the live link in the chat, let me say thank you. Thank you for your presence, your openness, your generosity during this conversation. You really made this a very, very rich learning community. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to be in the learning community with you. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much. And I hope we'll see each other sometime in the future. So having said that, folks, I'm going to share the last slide. It has a QR code on it that you can use to scan, and it will bring up the evaluation, or you can use the live link in the chat. Please do take a moment to complete the evaluation. And once you've completed it, feel free to log off.